So now to fix that user experience, we have two options which I can think of right now. All right. So what options we have? The options we have when we come here and user is not authenticated, user has already put the long URL, then we need to somewhere store that URL, and then we can navigate to login page, and then we can come back to this page. And because this page is interactive, we have access to browser. So what we can do here, first thing, we can either have this long URL as a part of the actual current URL. So instead of directly having this account slash login, we might have something like maybe something like this long URL equals, and then here we can have model long URL. So like this underscore model dot long URL, we can URL encode it. Now I'm not in favor of this because we can easily tamper the URL. So the second approach, you can try this approach if you want. And the second approach we have, we can store this URL somewhere in the browser's storage. When we say browser storage, we can store it in local storage or session storage. So we are going to use this approach only. All right. So for that, let's create a new service here. So in services folder, I'm going to create a service. I'll say session storage. You can use local storage as well, but this is a small piece of code which belongs to this current tab or session, we could say. So we are okay if that got lost, if user closed the browser or anything like that happens. All right, so yeah, session storage.cs. All right, and now here it is going to have, first thing we need to use, in order to access session storage or local storage, we need JavaScript. Right, C# can't directly connect to it, so we will connect using JavaScript interop. So we need to inject IJS runtime here. Okay, let's call it JS runtime only. And now we will have first public async task, we'll say set or maybe save async. Okay, here we need one key and then value. All right, and from here we could say await JS runtime dot invoke void async. Now this session storage window dot session storage, we can access it like this, and then we need to provide the parameters here. Now window session storage dot set item, this is the method. All right, and then parameters, the parameters are going to be first key and second value. Now when we save something, it does not return anything, so that's why we are using invoke void async. So save part is ready. After this we need the getting part. So public async task of string, we'll say get async, and here we need to provide key. All right, so from this key we can simply use this complete line, and we'll change it. First thing, it should not be invoke void async, it should be invoke async, and it is going to return us a string. All right, and that too nullable string, we could say. So instead of set item, the method name is get item, window.sessionStorage.get item, and it requires one parameter which is key. All right, So from here we need to return this, and let's make this return nullable. Okay, then we can have third method, public async task. We'll say remove async and string key. Alright, so it has, let's use this invoke void async. So when we remove any item from the session storage, it does not return anything. So we are going to call invoke void async. The method name is remove item, and it also needs just key, nothing else. So our session storage service is ready. Now this service, this JavaScript belongs in browser only. It does not exist on server. Okay, so it will be called from interactive parts only. That means from client only. So we cannot register it in the main project. We need to register it inside this client project only. Alright, so we'll go to program.cs of client project, and here we'll say builder.services. We can use add scope, and we'll say session storage. Oh, I just call it session storage. Let's rename it to session storage service, or maybe let's have it session storage only. All right. Okay, now we can easily use this session storage. So if we go to our form, let's inject it on this short URL generator form. Inject session storage. Name it session storage. All right. Now when we are coming here, when user is not logged in, then what we'll do, we'll simply save this long URL in session storage and retrieve it when user logs in. Alright, so save this long URL. So we'll save this long URL, session storage dot save async, key and value. So this key, it could be anything. Let's do this, session storage. Let's change it to session storage service, the name actually, so that it can distinguish between these. So in session storage only, let's create a public constant, although it belongs to some constants, but I am not having that right now. That's why I'm having it like this. So public const string, and here we'll say long URL key. So this name is up to you. You can name it whatever you want. All right, now we are in here. So here we need to provide key, that is going to be session storage dot long URL key, comma, the value, that is underscore model dot long URL. This is the value. So now we have saved it. It is saying something because this call is not awaited, so we'll await it. All right, now we saved it. Now user is going to navigate to login, and after login, when user comes back, then we need to check if we have this value, and if we have this value, then we need to process it. Okay, so what we can do, when we comes back, the return URL could be anything. Maybe user is coming back to dashboard page, home page, or any other page. So we need to have this logic somewhere centralized so that it does not matter on which page your user comes back from login. Okay, so for that, what we can do, we need to have this logic somewhere on the layout. So component layout, main layout, we need to have that logic somewhere here. Okay, so but that logic should belong only when user is logged in. All right, so now there could be anything else as well. So we are going to follow one approach which Microsoft also follows. For example, there is this return to login dot treasure. Here it has just this thing, the server side related stuff, and this return to login, they have it somewhere in the routes, I guess. Not authorized, they are using this route redirect to login, and in that component they are directly using this on initialize and navigating to somewhere. So we are going to follow this approach only. What we'll do in our shared components, we are going to create one more Blazor component and we'll call it, let's say, post login action. You can name it whatever you want. So post login action means if there is any action which should be performed after login. Okay, so post login, or let's after login action, something like this. Okay, and here we will have that logic, but before that we need to call it somewhere. So we'll go to our layout, and here on top or bottom, it does not matter, we can have it anywhere. What we'll do, we'll simply add one authorized view. Inside this we'll use authorized. Inside this authorized, we are going to use after login action. Okay, so now when user is authorized, then only this component is going to be rendered, and we are not going to have any UI in this component. We are just going to have our logic in this component. Now on this page, first thing, we'll set render mode. This time I'm setting it on this component level, because whatever we are doing in this, that is kind of interactive, that is going to be executed after page has rendered. That means it cannot work inside SSR, never. All right, so in render mode, we'll set, this time I'm following this route, interactive auto render mode, and we need to define this parameter as false. We cannot have pre-rendering for this. Again, pre-rendering happens on server, and on server JavaScript does not exist. All right, but we need JavaScript for this component to action. All right, now we are not going to have any UI for now. After that, in code statement, we need to check if we have that item, that long URL in our session storage. So for that, we will inject our session storage. So session storage service. All right, and here now we have two options. First thing, we can say we can check it in on initialized async, but we are going to have one problem with this on initialized async. That is, so this interactive auto render mode, that means it can work with SignalR, with Blazor server, and Blazor Web Assembly. So when we talk about web assembly, at that time we are already in the browser, so we have access to browser APIs, we have access to JavaScript, we have access to session storage, so it can work with web assembly. But for Blazor server, the component gets initialized on server. All right, so on initialized works on server, and after that it comes back to the UI on the browser. So that means if we are using Blazor server for interactive auto render mode, if it is using SignalR, then it is not going to get the JavaScript inside this on initialized async. So that's why what we'll do, we are going to override one more method, that is on after render async, this method, which will be called for both the cases after on initialized. All right, so when the first render happens, after that it gets called, and here we'll simply check this. If this is the first render, then only we need to do this, because this method gets called each and every time we are performing any operation, we are adding anything, we are uh, interacting with the page, then it keep on calling. If we are changing some state, then also it keeps on calling. So we just need to have our logic for the first render only. All right, now what is that thing which we need? So we need to check if we have long URL. So we'll try to get it from our session storage service dot get async, and here we'll say session storage dot long URL key. Now we'll check if not string dot is null or white space long URL. That means we have long URL in storage. So now what we need to do? We need to generate short URL for this now. All right, and after this if, we will simply clear this long URL. So we'll say session storage service dot remove item or remove async session storage dot long URL key, this thing. All right, now we need that logic of generating the short URL here as well. So let's check what we are doing there. In short URL generator form, we were simply injecting ilink service, and then we were doing this stuff, getting the user ID, generating the DTO, and then calling this create link async method. All right, and then is processing true and false also we are doing. So let's do all this stuff. Now we know for this particular case, this thing does not belong here, because we are calling that when the user is logged in. That means this does not applicable there. All right, so let's do this. Let's have this is processing, because we need this. After that, we also need to get the current user ID. So let's use auth state as well here. And now inside this, we will set is processing to true, and at the event end, let's say is processing to false. And now in between this, we need to have, first let's get the user ID. So we'll say var auth state equals to await auth state task, and then we can get user ID. Well, let's copy all these things. So we are getting user ID from auth state dot user dot get user ID. Then we are creating DTO. So link create DTO. Now we need long URL, which we already have in this variable long URL. So let's use this, and then user ID. Then we are generating link. So link service. Let's inject this. Inject ilink service. Link service. And now we are good. Now we have generated our link from here after login. So we are setting this is processing. Let's use this is processing. So how we are going to use this? We are going to render this. So we'll say if is processing is true, we'll render our loader component. So save it. Everything is fine now. Let's quickly try it out if it works. And now we are getting this problem. There is no register service for this session storage, but we registered it. So let's see what is the problem here.